A pōpō ka mauri a te rangatira nei, ki runga ki te marae o Awahau i Ngotaha, te rohe o te arawa. Ka hupe hea nā kura mahita i muri mai i o rātau tau tohe mo nā utu inanahi nei. I nakua nei ka haere a mokotini ki te kōrero ki etahi o aua mahita.
Neke atu i te 2,000 ngā kaioko o ngā kura tuatahi o te motu, i whakatutu i te puahu ki te whakahē i ngā utu i wainga i a rātou me ngā kaioko o ngā kura tuarua. Ko tētahi o aua kura nei, ko Whānau Ata. Mai ngā kaiako puta ana ngā whakaro mo tēnei take.
Ko hoha ke ngā kākui nai nā te komihano ngā tari kāwanatanga e tohutuangia mai me pēnei me pēra. He kore mātou e whakai ki tēnā. Ko hoha ngia ki te hoki atu ki te tēpu, ki te whawhaki kauai hoki anō. Nā reira koe ki ngia te wā me tū pakiri ai tātou mō tātou nei pūtea.
Kei te kira te kāwanatanga, kāri o iri te wā mātou mahi ki nā kura tuarua, ne? Ko tāku e ki nei, kei te ritera wātu. E hara mai ana te nuingo o ngā mātua me ngā kaiako ki te titiro ki ngā kura tuatai, ka ki te rātau i te ua o te ako e ngā tamariki ko hunga. Anei ke, te pūtake, te tīmatatanga mai o ngā tamariki, kei konei.
Kei te whakai ngā kaioko nei, he rereke o rātou mahi ki era o ngā kura tuarua. Engari, ko te kaupapa ake, he ako o tira te utu me rite tonu.
Hei te ki atu mātou ko mai ngā moni whakarite ngia ngā moni. Kia mutu ai te pōrutua ngā kaia.
Kei te hohara wātu ngā kaioko i nai nei. No te me te taumaha hoki, te ua hoki o ngā mahi kei roti ngā kura tuatahi.
I tēnei wā ko te whakapai o te uniona o ngā kura tuatahi, a te marama e tū mai nei ka haere tonu ngā mahi porotu o ngā mahi ta huri noa te motu mō rātou utu. Ko mokotini mo te Karere.
Kua takoto nā tono ana ti whātua mo nā whenua huri a whio i te rohe o Tāmaki Makaurau.
The retention of the Māori language as an official language of Aotearoa and improving educational achievements of Māori students.
Tāwari mai, te tangata tāwari mai, poki mai, te wahine poki mai, mahia te mahi kua mahia, e moe te moe kua horahia, i nā matara huri ake nei. Te mea tuatahi, he whakatapu i te ingoa o te tupuna o te ao. Koe ia nei te tīmatanga, koe ia te whakaotinga o ngā mea katoa. A koe ia anō te kaupapa o tātātau wahanga kōrero i tēnei rā. Nā reira e ngā mātā waka, e ngā iwi, e ngā mana e ngā reo, ngā tamariki, ngā mokopuna, ngā koroua, ngā kuia, ngā morehu, o te hunga kua huri ki tua o te arai. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou i roto i ngā huatanga e pāmaina ki a tātou i tēnei wā. E te iwi, kua tangihi au tātou mate, kua mihi au tātou mate. Kāti ki a rātou. Engari me te tiro ake tātou ki te kaupapa, e mānu nei i tēnei wā, i tēnei haora. Ki te motu katoa, o te kaupapa, o roto mai, o te mea ki ia nei ko te anga marautanga. O ti rā, e te tiro ake ana tātou ki ngā huatanga o te pāngarau, o te pūtai ao. E rā huatanga e uru maina ki roto i ngā mahi a tātou, tamariki a tātou mokopuna. E te iwi, kei te anga nui atu tātou ki te huringa o tēnei rautau. E tomo atu ai tātou ki roto i te taurua mano, me ngā huatanga kei mua i a tātou. Kei pātai hia te pātai, hea wā tātou e whakarere i huana ki a tātou tamariki, ki a tātou mokopuna. E rātau anō, i te wā, e riroai mā rātau, e kaue ngā kaupapa a te iwi Māori. Nā reira ka te tiro atu ki tēnei te whakamānutanga o tēnei kaupapa, he kaupapa e rite ana ki te kōrero i kōrero tiara, he moana ke tā mata whaiti, he moana ke tā mata whānui. Kua tae tēnei ki te wā hei tiro mā tātou, ki ngā huatanga e pāna ki a tātou tamariki ki a tātou mokopuna. Kia whakamoe tia ngā huatanga o roto i te ao hou ki ngā huatanga o roto i te ao tawhito. Ki tāku titiro ake, ki tāku wānanga, ko tēnei o a tātou kaupapa, e whakamānutia nei tēnei wā. Kua taea e ia, te rā huatanga, a me te aha, e kākahuana tātou i a tātou tamariki, ki ngā kākahu o te ao hou kei te tūmai i mwai o rātou aroro. E ki ai rātou, ko ngā tuke mata, ko ngā taringa, ko ngā ringaringa, ko ngā waiwai, o ngā iwi i ngā tau kei te tūmai. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
E te matua tēnā koe e whakatuwhera nei i a tātou mahi. Tamariki mā tēnā ro atu koutou e tautoko nei i ana kōrero. Joining me this morning, a warm welcome to our panel, the Minister of Education, the Honourable Lockwood Smith, Kathy Jews, who heads Te Kura Kaupapa Māori.
Country. In 1990, there were 6. Today, there are 28, with a further 5 to be recognised this financial year. 335 schools now offer some form of Māori medium education, catering for almost 14% of Māori students. 2 wānanga, Te Wānanga o Aotearoa in Te Awamutu and Te Wānanga o Raukawa, were recognised by the government last year. Developments which are supported by local communities, which lead to higher levels of achievement for students and which, in these cases, ensure the survival of te reo Māori, are developments I will always support. My congratulations to all those who have led or supported the Māori education renaissance. Today's launch of 3 draft curriculum statements in te reo Māori, Pāngarau and Pūtaiao means another step in that renaissance as we approach Māori Language Year 1995. Each curriculum statement will help to ensure the survival of Māori as a living language and lead to higher levels of achievement for Māori students. Not before has New Zealand had a curriculum statement for the teaching of te reo Māori in all schools. The curriculum will define the achievement objectives we expect for students studying Māori right through the school years. It will ensure that all teachers and students of te reo Māori have clear national objectives to work towards. The draft curriculum statements for Pāngarau, and that's mathematics, and Pūtaiao, science, are equally important. The achievement objectives of the curriculum statements are precisely the same as those in the English versions of the mathematics and science curriculum statements. But the possible learning experiences and assessment examples have been modified. They've not just been translated into te reo Māori, but have been changed to take account of tikanga Māori. That means that students learning through Te Reo Māori will be working towards the same goals as everyone else. All that will be different is the path they're taking to get there. It will be a path that meets their needs better. Today we launch only the drafts of these curriculum statements. While teachers are encouraged to begin using them immediately, they'll not be finalised until 1996. Throughout next year, the 3 curriculum statements will be trialled in schools. The Ministry of Education and I want to hear from teachers, parents and the public to see how the curriculum statements can be improved before final release in 1996. They'll be fully implemented in schools in 1997. To support the implementation of the curriculum statements, $2.1 million has been allocated by the government for professional development for teachers over the next 2 years. As well as that investment, the Ministry of Education's contract with Learning Media requires that at least 22% of its required outputs are learning materials to support Māori language education. And when I make funding allocations to tertiary institutions for 1995, training for Māori medium teachers will be a priority. Today is an historic day for Māori education. I'm pleased as Minister of Education to be part of it. And as Minister, I would like to thank all those, too many to mention, who have given so much time, energy and wisdom to make today possible. With the release of these draft curriculum statements and with the government's ongoing commitment to Māori medium education, I'm confident the Māori education renaissance will go from strength to strength. Kia ora koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Minister. Kia ora. One of the aims of this launch is to improve the educational achievements of our students. And the million-dollar question is, will these curriculum in fact take us from strength to strength? And just how feasible will it be for kaiako to implement them? Last week I visited a local kura kaupapa in Mount Eden to find out what they thought. This total immersion primary school is tucked away under the shadows of Auckland's Mount Eden, from where the school takes its name, Te Kura Kaupapa or Maungawhau. There are 75 pupils on the roll and all of their learning is in Māori. They're all part of a Māori language renaissance that began 12 years ago with the opening of the first kohanga reo here at Whānau Ata in Wellington. This kohanga set the precedent for a total immersion environment for Māori preschoolers where only Māori language is spoken. The birth of kohanga reo was not only a Māori response to language loss, but created a niche for our kaumātua and kuia. And together, young and old began to bridge the gap for generations who had lost their mother tongue. The hope was kohanga would be the formula that in time would regenerate the language. They became the jewel in the Māori Affairs crown, who began funding the many language nests that mushroomed around the country. But after the devolution of Māori Affairs, funding was taken over by the Ministry of Education, who today spend almost $50 million a year on kohanga reo alone. Today, there are almost 800 kohanga reo around the country, attempting to provide a total immersion environment for 13,500 students. Once the first kohanga reo graduates reached the English-speaking primary schools, though, they quickly began to lose what Māori they'd learnt at kohanga. The answer? Kura kaupapa Māori schools like Maungawhau. However, 10 years ago, kura kaupapa was unheard of. And for a while, so was the funding. But it was the initiative and perseverance of visionaries like Dr. Peter Sharples that set the ball rolling. They were the first to break rank from state primary schools in 1985 and set up their own kura kaupapa Māori here at Whānau Ata in Auckland. But it wasn't until 1990 that the first 6 pilot schools were officially funded by the Ministry of Education, including Maungawhau. Today, there are 28 of these schools scattered around the country, and 5 more will be established by 1995. While the budget for Māori education this year is just over $196 million, $3.7 million was spent on setting up new kura kaupapa Māori.
The operations funding for Maungawhau this year is just over $72,500. This gets eaten up with maintenance and administrational costs.
We don't have any resources. What resources we have to make. Now, apart from a few books that come out from Learning Media, all other resources in our kura, we have to make ourselves, and that takes hours and hours of time. And yes, we have a need for far more resources. In the surrounding schools, the government supplies all these resources to get the curriculum going. But here in Kura Kaupapa Māori, we are at the moment following a national curriculum, but we have no resources in Te Reo Māori to fulfil the obligations to the national curriculum.
Today is a milestone for Kura Kaupapa Māori like Maungawhau. It marks the launch of a new draft curriculum in Māori for total immersion schools in 3 learning areas: maths, science and Māori language. However, Maungawhau feels strongly about what they would expect to see in a curriculum specifically set out to meet their needs.
Well, firstly, we would need funding to either purchase resources or pay people to make resources to fulfill the programs. Secondly, we're going to need training opportunities for our staff. You can't throw a new curriculum at the staff and not have the resources or the training to fulfill the programs that are required. And thirdly, we need our staff to be competent in te reo so that they can use the resources to meet the needs of the curriculum.
I hope that the curriculum embodies te aho matua, which are our guiding principles in Kura Kaupapa Māori, and that the new curriculum will help better and improve our teaching skills and the products, what we produce.
It's a waste of time throwing a new curriculum at teachers without the training and without the equipment for the programs. I mean, you wouldn't expect a carpenter to go out and build a house with twigs, would you? So why expect us to teach a new curriculum without anything to teach those things with?
Kia ora no tātou. Kia ora mōna whakaaro rangatira. To the panel, we've just heard the Kura Kaupapa or Maungawhau giving their needs and regarding their needs to implement the documents. Kathy, you head the Kura Kaupapa Māori o Ruamata in Te Arawa. Are your concerns any different from theirs?
My concerns are exactly the same, Hone. First of all, however, I'd like to refer back to the Minister's speech, if I can. I think that he's quite right in asking that the public at large should praise Māori people for taking the initiative with regard to educating our young people. And in view of the fact that the mainstream system was doing such a poor job of educating our children, and we have now taken the initiative and come up with some very innovative ideas to try to take control of that ourselves. I think he tika taho, Mr. Minister, mea mihi mai. With regard to the teachers and their concerns, the teachers of Maungawhau, I'm also a person who has to front up each day to 45 children ranging from new entrant to Form 5 level. And my concerns are exactly the same. The resourcing is absolutely essential. I would suggest that 22% of Learning Media's budget to be allocated to producing Māori resources is not enough. I would also suggest that $2.1 million for teacher development, Mr. Minister, is not enough. When you consider that teachers have to be upskilled and some even in-skilled, they have to be experts in the subject, they have to become experts in the language, and there is a lot of new vocabulary, wonderful new vocabulary which has come out, which we've started using ourselves. Immediately the first drafts were produced, we were into that vocabulary and using it. there's also a certain methodology which the teachers have to learn, and I think one of the teachers at Maungawhau hit the nail on the head when she mentioned Te Aho Matua and using that as the guiding principles there as a way of introducing a kind of methodology into the classroom where children are empowered to learn and are guided to achieve the competencies and achieve the standards which the drafts state ought to be achieved. The training also has to be given to new teachers if we're to understand that 5 new kura kaupapa Māori are going to be created every year, and also more immersion schools are going to come on board and begin teaching totally in Māori. We're going to require a lot more new teachers coming into the system as well. So, Mr. Minister, with regard to resourcing and a commitment from government, I think, needs to be made now to provide a substantial amount of vote education to resourcing these 3 drafts, and then a great deal of research has also to be done. As far as I'm aware, no research has been done since 1989 when legislation was, when kura kaupapa Māori were legislated for. There really ought to have been people within the ministry who had the vision to see that a certain plan was going to have to be put in place and information would have to be gathered. And it's that kind of research information that we're needing. The content of the science curriculum statement and the maths curriculum statement includes a lot of Māori content, and we're going to need that to be researched and provided to all those hard-working, determined, courageous teachers who are at the chalk face.
I'll give the Minister a chance. There were so many points in there, Cathy, and they were so pertinent as well about the implementation of these drafts. Minister, the money, the 2.1 million that you have actually tagged for training, at the end of the day, to support the implementation of these drafts, at the end of the day, who will have priority in training? Will they be Māori teachers who have a high level of competency in Māori language, or those who haven't?
Whānau, we're approaching it from more than one angle because I think we need to. The problems are very large. I've got no argument with what either Cathy or what Hoana Mitchell said. We're looking at new teachers because, as Cathy said, with 5 new kura each year, we need more young teachers coming on, and we've got 104 of what we call our EFTSs, equivalent full-time students. That's places in our teachers' colleges, specially pigeonholed for Māori medium education. And so that's new teachers we have coming through each year, 104 equivalent full-time places there. Then we also are spending money on taking trained teachers who are in our system now, have some fluency in Māori language, but need to be more fluent to really be able to teach in immersion classes.
So where will the priority be? Fluent speakers or not so fluent?
It'll be with trained teachers who we can make more fluent. And we've got special 12-week programs that we're spending quite a lot of money on now to get teachers who have got reasonable strength in language to make them much more fluent. So that's getting new teachers, if you like, coming into the system, improving the language strengths of trained teachers already in the system. And then we'll also have ongoing contractual teacher development work that'll be part and parcel of this new curriculum that we've launched here today.
Will the 2.1 be, will that be an increase in the Māori funding for education, or will you be robbing Peter to pay Paul?
Well, when you add all those initiatives together, the 2.1 million is only one element of it. There's further 1.7 million is part of the ongoing teacher development, because I forgot to mention the whakapakari program for the teacher development in Kohanga. There's 1.7 million going in there. There are some millions going in each of these different program areas. The 2.1 million is just the extra bit, and it is extra. To answer your question, it's extra that's specifically earmarked to help support the teacher development for this new curriculum in Te Reo Māori.
Katerina, you're a Māori language advisor to the Minister regarding funding to being able to implement these draft documents here. What are your thoughts about that?
The funding is not my problem, other than to produce as much product out of every dollar we spend. Isn't that right, Mr. Minister?
Will you be trying to convince the Minister to increase the pūtea?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's part of the whole negotiation business. But I would like to pick up on 2 points. You know, Kathy covered the whole area so well. I don't want to go back on that area. There are 2 points that I think that are absolutely crucial, and the Minister has mentioned them, so has Kathy, and that's the training of teachers. I would like to submit that one of our biggest problems is the trainers, especially in Kurakaupapa Māori, and their particular philosophy, which Kathy mentioned, the aho matua. Unfortunately, some of our trainers came out of the mainstream teacher training system and therefore are not au fait with the very special aspects that the Kurakaupapa Māori people feel are so important for their children. So I have a feeling that and I'm pleased that the Minister is aware that we need to have a much broader spectrum in terms of teacher training. And I would like to submit, Mr. Minister, that unless the training involves the people who are at the chalk face like Kathy, then it may be, again, losing value for every dollar we spend. And I'm, at the moment, trying to bring together all of the threads that might make the whole thrust of training service better the people out there, the children that we are teaching.
And that's for
But
people like
we're
Ed
all
here.
on a, yes, and people like Ed. We're all on a huge learning curve. This is an entirely new area. It makes me feel like our tipuna must have felt when they came on their waka over here. We are launching new waka every day, Mr. Minister. And you're part of that. I'm working very hard to sort of keep you online with the curve as well. And so there are challenges. I prefer to talk about them as challenges rather than concerns. There are real challenges. That one of the training is a particular one. But the other one, Mr. Minister, that really concerns me, which Kathy did not mention, when we talk about pre-service training and the pool of teachers coming into the field, it's the pool of language-speaking young people that is diminishing. Now that is the area that needs to be really bolstered up. More training for young Māori people to increase their language expertise before they move into teacher training.
And Ed, is it a challenge for you? I mean, your situation, you're in a total immersion unit in a mainstream school. Your students are from all tribal areas and all races. Are the challenges for you in terms of being able to implement this any different from Kathy or from what Katarina has said?
Our needs for implementing these curriculum statements are very similar. The needs are very similar. And like to cover over those points, I'd like to see the funding of these curriculum statements. My main concern, I guess, Minister, would be, one question that I do have, is the 2.1 million from the Māori language factor funding?
No, definitely not, Ed. Definitely not. It's new money that I got in the last budget to support teacher development for the whole redevelopment of the New Zealand school curriculum. And of course, this part of it is especially for the development of these Māori curriculum statements. So it's new money, definitely not part of the Māori language factor funding. That would be terrible to take it from there.
Do you think it's enough, Ed, the 2.1 million that the Minister's talked about?
Honestly, no, I don't think. 2.1, I'd like to know how the Minister researched that to give an amount such as 2.1. Will it actually meet the needs of those teachers that are at the chalk face that are going to implement these curriculum statements?
Has it been researched?
Honey, I'm not disappointed that Kathy and Ed both say that it's not enough, because I don't pretend it's enough either. It's really just a start. And
can we get more?
Well, this is just the start. We'll soon be starting work on the Māori curriculum statement in social studies, because we're just finalising the English version of that now, and it won't just be a translation. That'll be a whole new development, just as Pūtaiao and Pāngarau have been, and so it'll need a lot more funding to support teacher development there. The other element, of course, that Whānau mentioned that is so important is the resource area. Because I've heard people like Kathy and Ed saying for years now, ever since I've been minister, that they've had to make their own teaching materials, the materials to help the children in the classroom. Now, with these new curriculum statements, we'll actually be producing those materials and making them available to schools. And that's going to be a big shift forward, because I'm amazed how the people in Kurakaupapa Māori and Kohangaro have done it themselves.
Is that a good thing, Roberta and Kathy, briefly?
Oh, absolutely excellent development. We've been looking forward to it for many years. One example that we have of a Kurakaupapa Māori Standard 4 class who did extremely well on a maths test and compared with a mainstream English-speaking school, and they achieved results higher than the mainstream English-speaking class with few resources, and these children had learned totally in Māori. Now, Mr. Minister, if those students can achieve those standards of excellence on few resources, imagine what we can do when we're properly resourced. We can even go beyond the standards that have been set and are expected of at each level of the curriculum. I don't think we can impress upon you enough how urgent it is, Mr. Minister.
Okay, I'm going to go just briefly now. We're running out of time, but just go down the panel. Ed, just your two main concerns, just briefly.
The first one would be, will training provide, for me and my colleagues, the expertise and the skills to ensure that high-quality programs in Te Reo and to all this meet the learning needs for my children?
Absolutely. Kathy, just briefly, there's two main points.
Please look after our teachers so that we're not being flogged too much and we can deliver well to our children.
Katerina, the fire, just your two main
Ed
concerns
and Kathy
again.
have in fact expressed my main concern. My job is to try and satisfy what they are crying out for.
And your advice to the Minister will be in a year's time?
Let's get, not a year's time, tomorrow, Mr. Minister, can we speak about this teacher training thing
and
find a few more solutions?
And briefly, Minister, will you be able to deliver the resources, yes or no, enough to meet the needs that have been discussed here?
I hear the needs, Whānau. I'll be working very hard to deliver those resources. Will you meet them? I'll be doing my very best.
Okay, kia tātou katoa. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Ed, Kathy, Katerina and the Minister. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
And there we have it, the launch of the first ever draft in Māori for teaching maths, science and Māori language. The Māori language draft will be trialled in schools from the beginning of next year, and the maths and science draft will be trialled from July of next year. The three final drafts are deadlined for 1996. We close our launch this morning with Edward and his tamariki singing about the importance of Māori language to their education.
Tāhua hoki. Tēnā koutou tamariki mā mō tā koutou waiata whakahirahira. Iaia nei kai te huri ake tātou, te titiro ki ngā hui, kai muia ia tātou.